And there you are. Good
Hey,
evening,
hey.
everyone. Welcome to all you global strategists, and welcome to, I guess it's now Sunday night live and rambling. Our first Sunday night presentation. We're usually on Saturday nights, but talking to some people, we thought Sunday nights might be a little bit better for most of our members, most of the family. So glad to be with you. I'm Clay, joined by the awesome E Train, who is still trying to dry her hair, I think.
No, it just, I put a weird product in it, got a little crunchy. Sorry.
A weird product.
Thank
That
you
just sounds
for making fun of me, though.
That just sounds, as a guy, we never get used to hearing somebody talk about putting product in your hair. It's
Oh,
grease,
you put product in
oil,
your hair. I don't even
conditioner,
want to hear it.
whatever.
Whatever you say.
I'm not I'm not arguing with, putting something in it to help tame the mane. I'm just calling it product is
The
still
idea.
yeah, it's still
Well,
weird, just a
because it
weird
could mean
term.
1,000 different things. Is this better if I put it up? Will you be less
No,
offended?
whatever is most comfortable for you.
Down was until you had to make a comment, but we're good now. Don't worry.
I have always liked your hair, even, when you've been bald or when it's been long.
I have never been bald. What are you talking about?
Um,
All righty.
welcome
Whatever.
to
Let's go. Let's do this.
Profit on Money, where we unpack some of the biggest economic and geopolitical showdowns of the century. Tonight, we're going to talk about uh, Trump, chess or checkers with China. This is the
Not that I'm
story,
overly
really, I
sensitive
believe.
about my hair right now.
Don't be. It looks good. For those of you who don't know, E Train used to be, or is used to be, whatever, a hairstylist. So hair is a big thing to her. And so
Well, God, I didn't realize it looked so damn bad until you said something.
it didn't look bad, Goober.
Whatever.
If it looked bad, I would tell you. How many times in your life have I told you that it looked bad?
Quite a few, actually.
Well, when it's greasy and hadn't been washed in 2 weeks.
Welcome to the
Um,
shit show that is Moffat on Money. For those of you who have never watched before.
for those of you that don't know, E Train and I have been friends for quite a while, and we give each
At least
other kind of
10
a
years. And yeah.
yeah, we give each other hell on occasion, and that just shows we still care. Now,
Is that what that is?
that's what that is. It's my
Okay.
story, and I'm sticking to it.
Fair enough.
Now, tonight, the question is, what is Trump really trying to do? Does he have a plan? Does he have a game? Um, is this more of a, I don't know, a Cold War thriller with, dollars and the yuan, very hard of an economy, uh, instead of missiles? Is Trump trying to bring back a few jobs to the U.S., or is he trying to drive a stake into the heart of China's economic power? We're going to talk about that and try to see if we can make
Mhm.
some sense out of all the quote unquote chaos going on. The show is for investors, whether you've got $500 in a brokerage account or, millions in ETFs, or any geopolitics fan who love a good global chess match. And, we have talked about China's economy repeatedly over the past several years. It obviously has a big impact or influence on the U.S. economy, as well as other geopolitical tensions and ramifications. It is a significant factor in the future of this country, as well as to the prosperity, productivity of the rest of the world. So we spend some time on China regularly, and we've talked about how China has been experiencing kind of an economic meltdown for the past couple of years. And that's really, truly what it is. Housing, real estate is crashing. The yuan is fluctuating all over the place. Their bond market, their stock market is in chaos. Factories are shutting down by the thousands. Now, Trump, with his advisor Scott Bessent, is playing hardball with tariffs. Some say it could topple Xi's government, the leader of China, Yingling Xi, without firing a shot. So, is this a chess master plan or kind of a checkers bluff? We'll break that down tonight. We'll break down the turmoil, the strategy, take a look at the stakes, kind of what it means, more importantly, to your wallet and to the world. So, my encouragement to you, the viewers, is go grab a good scotch or a coffee and, maybe a chessboard, and let's see what is going on in China. Now,
Wait, hang on. If you don't know, I'm typically am watching all three screens just in case. So if I seem distracted or put my eyes somewhere else, that's why.
And yes, if you have some questions, we have viewers on X, on Rumble, and on YouTube. Now, for those watching YouTube and X, we believe the questions normally flow through to our intermediary, our broadcast, which is StreamYard. So that's what we're in right now, is StreamYard. We're using that to broadcast to the three media. I don't think Rumble passes through. It hasn't in the past. So if you have a question and you're watching on Rumble, go ahead and type it in Rumble. E-Train, keeps an eye on it and will relay the question to us. And we heartily encourage viewers to ask questions. If I say something that doesn't make sense, brings up some other issue or concern that you may have, just feel free to throw it out. We run a relatively informal broadcast here. So, China. It is now May of 2025, and China's economy, I guess I would best describe it as a pagoda tower ready to collapse. It is cracked. It is leaning, the leaning pagoda of Beijing. It has, basically economy has four pillars: housing, the currency, bonds, and stocks. All of those are in turmoil or deeply distressed. There have been tons of red warning signs flashing in China for the last several years as Xi has consolidated power and extended his control. It's like he's trying to bring back the good old days of Mao. And obviously, the changes have not been for the better in terms of the economy or the people living in China. It has really only benefited the ruling elite. So for, investors, for geopolitical fans, it's a sign of shifting power. China has been...
That sounds familiar, Clay.
What does?
Only the elites are benefiting.
Oh, yeah. Can't say we haven't seen that closer to home as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as more and more power is concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer, that's the reason, that's the result, time and time again. History is very clear on that. Hello, Jane. Good to see you. And Keith, do you think China got involved in Ukraine versus Russia to hopefully have Russia help them financially? Russia is struggling financially too, but I think they are helping for a couple reasons. One, they haven't been their troops haven't fought in a real battle since the Korean War. They are not battle tested. They have not been able to test their equipment in real life war combat situations. They need the experience, particularly if they're thinking about invading Taiwan. So it gives them, first of all, kind of a real world chance to develop some skills, improve their techniques, and test their capabilities. Secondly, they want Russia in their sphere of influence. Russia has tried to become more westernized. They need the capital of the West. They need the capabilities of the West to improve their own economy, their own resources. But the West has really not been very open to that. Back when the Berlin Wall fell, when communism toppled, Russia actually, who was it, Gorbachev, actually requested a consideration for admission to NATO. They really wanted to form a close alliance with the Western countries and kind of push into the dustbin of history their association with communists. Well, the West was not open to that. And at that time, there were promises made to Russia by NATO countries, the U.S. in particular, that NATO would not move eastward. Well, we've seen NATO move eastward, and that's been a huge irritant and kind of a big red flag to many of the old line communists. So it's created some issues.
I mean, we basically just pushed Russia closer to China.
Yeah.
To form an alliance.
And that's a tandem we really, really don't want to see happen. If there is a war between the U.S. and China, you don't want Russia offering equipment, helping with air cover, whatever, to the Chinese. We're better off not fighting both if we have to fight. And I think that's part of Trump's strategy, and we'll get into that as we go through tonight. But I think, a lot of this tariff campaign is really aimed at China for a number of reasons. Look at the Secretary Treasury, Scott Bessent. The guy has a lot of experience in exploiting weak economies and currencies. He destroyed the British pound. He, along with Druckenmiller and Soros in 92, destroyed the British pound, made billions. He did it again against the yen in 2010. There's not a more experienced or more capable individual to exploit economic weakness and exploit/destroy a currency. And we'll get into that as we go through the show.
Sorry. All right. Keith.
I agree that Ukraine shouldn't be added to NATO. Yeah, I think we can. Trump is walking a fine line here. But I think by signing the minerals agreement and selling them a little bit more U.S. equipment, having U.S. companies locate in there, that will offer Ukraine kind of a de facto protection without an explicit one. And so I think for now, given the tension and the delicacy of relations now, I think that's probably the best of all possible worlds. This gets into some other things like Putin. I think Putin has started talking about a successor, which for the past 10, 20 years has been tantamount to treason. There's rumors that Putin is sick. And, if that's true and he is planning a line of succession, then we want to have somebody in that line that is obviously still more desirous of joining and forming relationships with the West than with a hardline communist nation dedicated to our destruction. Jane, should the U.S. still even be in NATO? That's an interesting question. There's, some benefits to being in NATO in terms of being able to influence things. Flip side is we have been NATO. We have paid for it. We've, carried the burden
in spades.
In spades. There's been talk over the past few months of, Trump thinking about wanting to withdraw from NATO, and NATO, the NATO countries, Germany, France, and others have declared that they're going to greatly increase their spending on defense. Germany, as of, a year ago, was training with brooms. They had fewer than...
What is that?
Brooms sweeping the floor.
Oh, literally. Okay.
Literally. They didn't have...
like, is that an organization? Like, what are you talking about?
They didn't have enough guns for their recruits to train with. They had something like only 10 working tanks, some ridiculously low number. I forget the exact number. But Western European defenses are in horrible shape. A good Boy Scouts troop could march through there fairly unopposed. Now, the Eastern European, Poland, some of the other, Poland has got a fine military, well-trained, good people. Mm-hmm. Some of the other countries have some good special forces, some good units, but top to bottom, their militaries have been grossly underfunded for decades. So much of the training has not been rigorous. The equipment has been, they're behind. They won't fix that in under a decade. And that's if they commit to significant spending, which most of them are heavily in debt, have huge social programs. Germany's manufacturing base has been being killed off. Their energy base has been being killed off by the government for 15 years. So their ability to produce goods has greatly, greatly reduced the past decade. Where are they going to get the stuff from? I don't think they want to buy it from us. Well, China. I don't think they want to buy it from China. Nobody really likes Chinese military equipment historically. China has a great gift of over-promising and under-developing.
Well, if they don't get it from us, they get it from China, they can get it from Russia? Do they create military?
Yeah, there's just nobody that manufactures the level of equipment that we do, top to bottom. Now, Sweden has a fighter that is very good. The Typhoon is a very serviceable fighter. There are some good pieces, but top to bottom. The manufacturing capability is just not there. They can produce small quantities of good stuff. They have an air-to-air missile, the Meteor, that's very good. Just the ability to produce them in large quantity is limited.
Like the man pads, where did those come from?
Most of them are a version of the U.S. Stinger. Russia produces a pretty decent one. China has a knockoff. There are small mobile units produced by the British and the French that are solid. So it just, some of them you can mount like on the back of a Jeep, or hell, tape it to a Toyota pickup called a technical. But top to bottom, if they don't buy massive equipment from us, it's going to be really hard for them to source it over the next few years. They've got a lot of work to do.
All right. We've got quite a few questions. So I'm going to show you two from Jane, if you'll answer those at one time.
Okay. China's in a world of hurt, but they don't make a deal very quickly. Christmas orders need to go in May, June, and July. And the second one, retailers and marketplaces are currently scrambling to figure out what to do for Christmas. Those who make deals quickly will be winners. They will. The tariffs are already starting to go into effect. So if they haven't received it by now, not ordered it, but received it by now, they'll have to pay the tariff. Now, paying the tariff is not necessarily having the impact that I've seen a lot of internet prognosticators throw out,
Mm-hmm.
145%. Well, keep in mind the tariff prices is only on the tariff tax. I'll go ahead and call it a tax, is only on the wholesale price. And like we've seen for the designer brands, some importing a Prada purse. Does Prada make purses? Did I get that right?
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Okay. Or whatever, Gucci or fancy purse. China manufactures it for a wholesale cost of about $10 or $20. So it hits the Los Angeles port $20 in value. That's taxed, at 140%. So you've got basically a $30 tax added to it. So now it's $50. Well, it goes to Macy's or whatever store and it's sold for $1,000. So the tax is inconsequential on a lot of goods because of the huge markups on Chinese products. Even on Christmas toys, the tax may only increase the prices of a lot of the Christmas toys by 10%, 20%, which is an increase, but it's not going to be the end of the world for the American consumer. Versus some of the promise that the tariffs hold. And we'll get into that some.
All right. We got 2 comments and a question from Keith.
Okay.
By the way, Clay, say hi, Keith. Good to see
Keith.
you here.
Hi, good. How you doing?
His manners are off tonight.
Appreciate you joining us tonight. Yes, the U.S. should stay in NATO in my option. We need to be the big man on campus. There is that advantage. Trump has threatened to leave. I don't know if he's really serious about leaving if NATO will start sharing the burden. And we'll talk about some suggestions that NATO has made or offered up in the past week. If the U.S. leaves NATO, I believe it would collapse. It would just turn into an EU army, which is what the leaders of the European Union want anyway. They want to turn Europe into one country. And so it kind of gives them some ability to go ahead and start forming a European army. Now, some of the countries, Hungary, Poland, the countries that lived under communism are not warm to that at all. And I don't believe they'll participate. They'll join kind of an economic union, no tariffs, no passports, et cetera, necessary. But in terms of subjugating their military to command by, somebody in Brussels, I don't think that'll go over. Now, Germany, France, Belgium, Denmark probably would. Back to China and the U.S. checker chess. Tariffs should continue. If we were talking chess or checkers, should we be calling out not allowing China to buy large areas of land here? I'm going to actually delay that question because I kind of talk about how the money flow works. And so I'm going to delay that question for a bit. So keep that in your mind.
Okay, hang on. And then this might just be in between them.
Yeah, of course it would collapse. Should we be the police for the whole world? Jane, we have always been the police since before our time. Look at all the wars.
True.
That is one thing about Trump. He had no new involvements in his first term, and I am very confident he'd like to say the same thing this term. Now, he'll threaten things in order to try to get results. And the Houthis, we're bombing the hell out of them. They have attacked U.S. ships. And so we are leveling, what positions we can find. They're up in the mountains. And so obviously, you're not going to get them all without a extremely prolonged and massive air campaign, which will have a lot of other casualties. And I don't think that's what we want. I don't think that's, what Trump will do. I think he'll just keep pounding them enough to keep their heads down and hopefully destroy most of their missiles whenever we have the opportunity to. But I don't think he wants a new war with Iran, even though that's kind of being intimated now. But he definitely does not want Iran to get nukes. So if he can pressure them economically, cut them off, and they decide instead of continuing that and risking war that they will suspend their nuclear development, all to the better. But we'll see how that works out. They have done it in the past, so I'm hopeful they will do it again. And all this, increase and drum beating will be, just for PR purposes and not a prediction of the future. All right, back to China. Jane, the U.S. does seem to be an aggressor in a lot of wars. We've lost so many lives for what? This is so very sad. Can't argue that.
Clay,
I
have lost my ability to gift memberships.
Uh-oh.
Or I've lost my ability to log in as you. I don't know. I can't log in as you anymore. Like every platform knows it's me.
Huh.
As a manager logged into your account.
Do what?
It knows it's me now on every platform. Trying to, whether it's the laptop or the iPad or the phone. I used to be able to sneak around on the
but you log out and it won't let you re-log in. We'll talk about it after the show.
Okay, just saying. Trying to gift memberships, but I can't.
All right, back to China. We talked about China for a couple of years, and I pointed out how repeatedly that their housing situation, their real estate situation, commercial and housing, is a disaster, utter disaster. The property market in China, which was China's economic growth engine, their engine of growth, has been and remains in a free fall. Most of you probably won't remember, but we talked about it. Their largest real estate development company, Evergrande, collapsed in 2022. And I mean, that was a write-off of like $300 billion in debt. And that's only one firm. Prices.
Can you write that off?
No, I mean, people don't get paid their money. It's just a loss of capital.
Yeah.
It hurts the lenders and the banks greatly. And now you see prices in Shanghai are down, 30, 35, 40% per Bloomberg data. There's also posts from people who, Chinese expats. Jennifer Zing, 97 on X, has a really good site showing tons of empty condos, ghost towns. I mean, ghost towns on steroids, huge skyscrapers and everything, a big metropolis, and they're all just being brought to the ground because nobody lives there. It's an empty city. Imagine building a city the size of, I don't know, Knoxville, Tennessee, and nobody living there, and then having to destroy it all. So investors have been steering clear of Chinese real estate, particularly ETFs like VNQI. It's down nearly 20% this year. Simply would not want to invest any funds in China right now. The yuan has been sliding pretty fast. It hit 7.5 to the dollar. A couple of weeks ago, the weakest it's been in years. It was down 5% since January. Now, the Bank of China has been actively buying the hell out of the yuan to prop it back up. It's currently at around 7.3. The reason is because it's 7.5, 7.7, 7.8. The house comes tumbling down for China. A weak yuan just absolutely crushes their real estate, their investments. It will just kick whatever remaining legs out from under the economy. Now, Trump's
Clay,
tariffs. Yes, ma'am.
is this the same thing that we did during COVID?
What do you mean?
Didn't the government start buying our own or pumping money into the market to keep things moving?
Oh, yeah, the Fed particularly.
Mm-hmm.
The Fed doesn't pump it in directly. They will lower the interest rate down to zero and make basically free loans to banks. Well, banks then have this money that doesn't cost them anything, and they can do one of two things with it. They can make loans, which nobody wanted to borrow money. Or the second thing is they can buy investments. So they take this money very cheaply, cheap money from the Fed, near 0%, and invest it, say, in treasuries or stocks. Treasuries at the time will pay 0.5%. So they get a spread of about 40 basis points. So it's like free money to them. They borrow all they want. They can invest it and just capture a spread. Free money, guaranteed. No risk. So they like that, and they want that back again. That's one reason why the market for the past decade or 12 years, every time bad news has been released about the economy, the market goes up. It's because everybody is thinking, hey, the Fed will start giving free money again because the economy's turning bad. And that actually had a name. At first, it was known as the Bernanke put.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime the market went down, it was exercised to keep it from going down further. Or the Yellen put. If you'll remember, Janet Yellen was not only president of the Fed, chairman of the Fed, but she was Biden's Treasury Secretary.
Yep.
So now Powell has refused to really utilize a put. Good. He hasn't been tracking the stock market. He feels like that's part of what has gotten us in all this mess, economic mess. So he has been reluctant, but it's always a possibility. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through and look at, what if China started dumping treasuries? Dump their whole portfolio. So we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me. So if we look at the data, China's exports to the U.S. last year totaled about $440 billion. The U.S. imports were about 143. So their exports to the U.S. dwarf their imports from the U.S. Now, a cheap yuan, I talked about how it hurt. A cheap yuan makes their goods cheaper, but it tanks their purchasing power. They get fewer dollars for everything they sell. And they need dollars. They need that hard currency to pay their international bills, their international debts. Most people don't want to get paid in the yuan because they know what's coming. That's why we're seeing, that's why we're seeing more and more traders eye yuan dollar pairs or buying gold to hedge. You saw that run up in gold over the past 6 months. Well, that's why. A lot of Chinese money was bailing out of the yuan. Also, a drop on the yuan puts even more pressure on China's housing markets, which are, all denominated in the yuan. The more the yuan falls, the more value is lost in housing and property, which encourages more and more selling by investors. trying to dump the property before things get even worse, foreign and domestic. So these are properties that are already in distress. Remember the US in 2007, 2008?
Oh, yeah.
You saw property values start to fall. And that fall accelerated an increase as more and more people tried getting out of it. That's where China is. And they're trying to prevent that from getting even worse by propping up the yuan so it doesn't fall or devalue even further. Does that make sense?
Get there?
Yeah. If I say something again, if I am explaining something and it doesn't make sense to you, please let me know. Ask a question. And that's for you viewers out there.
Please.
Yeah, E-Train, I don't have to tell her to ask a question if she wants to. She is not bashful.
No, I'm not.
That is her gift.
I prefer y'all to ask questions, but whatever.
So also you got to keep in mind, the less the U.S. buys from China, the less demand there is for the yuan, and the price falls. It's supply and demand. China has this capability of making 1,000 widgets, and the U.S. is buying 1,000 widgets. Well, all of a sudden, if the U.S. demand is cut and the U.S. only wants 600 or 500 widgets, then what does China do with the other half? Price falls.
I didn't think. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Ignore me. No, because I'm looking it up before I ask a stupid question.
No, that's all right. There are no stupid questions. So there are multiple pressures on the yuan. Everybody in the world but China wants the yuan to fall or expects the yuan to fall. And that's a real problem for China. And I hope now you understand a little bit better why China is fighting so hard to try to prop it up. It's highly, highly destructive if it falls. I've got a Chinese student, one of my grad students, who told me she only transfers money in Bitcoin. Trying to transfer money in the yuan, convert it to dollars is too risky, too expensive. So she only uses Bitcoin. China's bond market is a mess. Nobody wants China's bonds, but China's, government bond yields are up as investors flee to the U.S. after some initial selling of treasuries by the central bank. Their property bonds, the bonds backing all of their real estate development deals, are all junk status. And their yields have only spiked with all the tariffs and tariff rumors. Now remember, teeter-totter. Yields go up, price goes down with bonds. So when I say, the yields have spiked, that means the prices have dropped significantly. Their stock market is also getting hammered. The CSI 300, which is China's version of the S&P 500, kind of a general standard index, is down about 11% from when Trump was elected. It's been hit by trade fears and now factory closures. It was down nearly 15% a couple of weeks ago, but China started requiring companies to buy back their own stock and begin dumping treasuries to generate some cash to pour into the market. So the Chinese stock market has rebounded a little bit, but it's not because investor attitudes have shifted. That's a big subcontext to keep in track when you're looking at the Chinese market. Tech manufacturing stocks are the worst off. So as an investor, this is just a warning. Chinese stocks are not only a gamble right now, but I would classify them as a losing bet. China is not only shutting factories down, they are blowing up relationships with former clients. If if you were Prada, sorry about that, or Gucci, or who's some of the other designer names? I, I don't even know. Obviously, I don't have a YouTube channel on high fashion. But if you're one of these designers that was having products made in China and then, you know, they send them to you, you glue your label on, send it to the US and charge $1,000 for it. Now China is exposing to the world they've been manufacturing that product, and they'll sell that very same product to you for $20. So they have utterly blown up and destroyed relationships with their major clients, customers. And that's only one example. China is dumping everything it can because all of a sudden all the orders have been canceled. Amazon just quit buying everything from them.
Really?
Yeah.
I did
So
not know that.
so they orders and piles of stuff are backing up at all the factories. That's why the factories are shutting down.
Well, the good news
Um,
is we did sign a deal with India, or at least we have an formal understanding.
Yeah, from what I hear, there will be deals signed with India, South Korea, Australia, Israel, Argentina, a bunch of them over the next week or two. So, and negotiating trade deals is kind of tricky because very few of them will come and say, okay, we'll remove all of our tariffs, all of our restrictions on your goods. You don't have any on ours. That's fair trade. That's simple. Most of them have certain industries they have to protect. And so, in order to keep that protection, they have to compromise and make up for it somewhere else. And that's why the negotiations take long. Like Europe, wants to protect certain of their industries from American exports, but they may agree to buy all their liquid natural gas from the US, that kind of thing. So that's why some of these negotiations aren't immediately quick. And it kind of shocks me that people are like, oh, this has been going on for a week, 2 weeks. Trump hasn't announced any trade deals. The world must hate him and not want to do anything. No, that's not quite the way it works. Keith, playing checkers or chess, should the U.S. start purchasing up China's land and companies? No. China is a communist government and they do not recognize property rights and they will not honor the contracts if they don't want to.
That
They'll
is true.
only honor it as long as it benefits them. Once it stops benefiting them, everything's a loss, 100% write off. So, as a U.S.
But they'll take
investor,
the money.
they'll take the money. As a U.S. investor, I would not invest a dime in China right now. And
Mm-mm.
I've had some great students that are Chinese, good, hardworking people. Went to school with some friends that are Chinese. Would love to work with them. Have written papers with them. But I would not invest in their country because of their government, not the people. And it's like some internationals don't like our government. I, I understand. I don't blame them. I haven't liked our
You do you,
government
boo.
for decades. So that's okay. I expect people to, most people to love their country and defend their country, their family, their friends, their culture, whatever. That's okay with me. Jane, to build on Keith's comment, do you think China will be selling its U.S. properties? I think they'll have to ultimately. They bought up a lot of land near U.S. bases, and that's all I'll say. You can imagine why they like that land in particular. I think they'll
Yeah, there's a
be
chart.
forcing.
Yeah, there's a chart out there that we've shown before. If any of you on here want it, I can send it to you. But it's basically it shows every military base and all the land, the farm land that China owns. It's all surrounding the main military bases.
Which is curious at best.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Missouri actually won a case, a settlement against China. And forgive me, I forget what the basis of the suit was, but the court awarded them the right to seize property in lieu of cash payment for the settlement. So China did not pay. They started seizing land owned by China, Chinese firms.
There is, oh God, I don't remember which congressional hearing I was listening to, but someone is in favor of forcing China to give up its holdings in the U.S. as far as land.
Yeah, I think increasingly there's more and more people who are open to that idea. And that is
Keith.
one kind of benefit to the quote unquote trade war is that,
Mm-hmm.
Trump said that, controversy creates discussion. And Trump has a way of being able to get people to discuss issues that they have previously ignored, not thought of, not paid attention to, for good or for bad. But I think discussion is generally good. I think, people gaining more understanding is a good thing. And so having this in the news, having people think about all these different little things going on, hearing different sides, I see no downside to that. I think, and that's one reason why we're doing the show tonight. Hopefully bring out some things that you weren't familiar with or that help give you a better understanding, help you make better decisions. Now,
Keith.
So then continue the tariffs hard on China. I'm going to delay that question too.
Okay.
Moving to answering that question.
And he also says, I feel the U.S. needs to make them sell, give up their property, their holdings.
Yeah.
I think, I'm with you.
I think that's in the works. I do. Mm-hmm. Now, I talked about the Chinese stock market is a bad bet. And China's destroying relationships with former clients, which they're going to remember that. And no company wants to do business with a supplier they can't trust. So China is cutting its own throat in the long run, showing people that they really are not trustworthy. That even, if they get inconvenienced in the slightest, they will screw you over. And, a lot of companies have already experienced this to some, shape, manner, or form. China, if you go to China and a company there steals your product, your intellectual property. Now, in the US, you can go sue somebody for copyright or trademark infringement or, patent infringement, whatever. The thing in China is foreign companies can't sue Chinese companies or the Chinese government and ever win. So they don't even try. So if a company in China steals your intellectual property, there's nothing you can do about it. China has made it official the past few weeks. They removed their IP laws, and it's just simply winner take all right now. They are desperate to dump stuff, and that rarely works out well for companies in that position long term. I mean, we've seen it. Desperation breeds idiocy, particularly when it's expressed as some sort of emotional or knee-jerk response. China is angry. They are mad as hell. They have lost face and were willing to take everyone down with them. They even caused their designers, their clients, to lose face. So this has far-reaching implications if you're looking for a supplier of product. Keith, I love that Trump was 45 and then skipped to 47. I believe this is showing how bad things were prior to him being 45. A businessman can truly make change. There is no doubt he's making change. And, it's no secret. I generally, I'm a small government person. I want the government, as I want to say, I want the government off my ass and out of my wallet. And Trump, generally moves in that direction. Doesn't mean I always like the way he does everything or what he says or necessarily how he goes about some things, but he is a change agent. He is bringing about and forcing significant change in the world, the global order, the way, the relationship between government and the private sector in the US, bringing about huge change. And change agents in history are rarely nice people. Nice people generally don't pressure others to make change. So that there's a trade-off there. Jane, as you always say, stupid should hurt, you know? And hopefully we'll have some more, we actually have a Moffat on Money hat that has that motto or slogan on the back. We'll hopefully have some more of those here soon. Stupid should hurt. All right. So let's take a look at, the present situation. I was going to say if you thought the asset markets were bad, but the past few days, markets have been pretty good. But the idea is I want to focus on China's backbone, kind of the economic underpinnings of their economy. It's arthritic, it's cracking, and it's breaking. China is closing factories left and right. Cargo is stacking up in China's ports. Container volume, saw a statistic the other day, container volume is down 90%. This isn't just like a little economic tremor. This is a geopolitical earthquake. Most of the commentary I see in the US is kind of like, oh, woe is me. We're going to have to pay a little bit more, or we may not have cheap plastic toys. The reality is that it's causing major upheaval in China. There are posts all over the net about China's response to the tariffs, and it tells the story. Factories are shutting down, orders are frozen, stores closing, people getting laid off. And like I say, container shipments have dropped 90%. Their economy is being shut down. Now, if you're on TikTok or some of the other social media, and you follow the Chinese channels, which I do some, you can see the factories trying to dump their production. It's strewn all over their floors. It's not orderly. It's not organized. It's just chaos from frustrated workers who are being laid off, just dumping it out there. There is a Keith, I've enjoyed this. I need to sign off due to business Zoom call. God bless. I'll be back again. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate the kind words and hope everything goes well with your call. Appreciate you joining us. Yeah, I mentioned that while you were gone. Stupid should hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back.
It always does. And the store is coming. I've actually made the first steps. I even sent proof to Clay. He was like, you can live on. So
yeah, she made me a life or death promise the other day, and I was like, I'm not going to hold it to you, hold you to it. But yeah, she got it done. So we all go, yay! We have a little store coming, so we can get more hats and we'll have some hopefully cool shirts. Been trying to come up with some other ideas for some stuff. Yeah, if you watch the show for long, I like pithy comments, quotes, or ideas, whatever. And so, we're going to put some of those on shirts. Anyway, China has built its economy on being America's cheap manufacturing hub. But with the tariffs, they can't continue. That China can't. China has a ton of debt. They are in a cash flow crunch. They don't have great liquidity. So they can't subsidize their employees who are laid off. They can't pay their employees who are laid off. There are riots or protests occurring. They aren't, I wouldn't call them riots yet, but huge protests occurring in China at the factories because workers haven't been paid for the goods they already produced, but that haven't been sold yet. The workers want to be paid. They need the money. Now, China, can't subsidize these employees for long. Maybe a few months at 10 to 20%, I've seen some people estimate. But at 145% tariffs with no sales, I mean, this is a death knell for their factories. There is growing chaos in their cities. Now, let's be honest, for Americans, it's likely that this is going to come with some discomfort or even pain. There will be supply chain disruptions. Your tech stocks, a lot of people think about Apple. I saw some people saying, Apple phones are going to go to $9,000. I have no idea where they got that idea from, but I've seen it. Some people stating that Apple phones are going to go to $9,000. Well, late this afternoon, the president or the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, stated that Apple will be able to source all of its phones for Americans from India or Vietnam, or maybe both. But there won't be any Chinese phones. So there won't be any tariff impact on Apple phones to American consumers. And that's just the first of many such announcements that we're likely to hear, as more and more companies reshore their manufacturing out of China and to other countries, even bring some of it back to the US. So what the net impact of the tariffs will be on Americans, I can't really say. I can't give you a good, honest guess, though I expect there to be some loss. Some small firms probably hurt. But the impact on China is devastating and will be long-term, because once these companies leave, they're not coming back. And for those who are geopolitical fans, this is kind of where it gets juicy. Those jobs are vanishing, and that will fuel unrest in the country. If factories can't operate, the economic pressure mounts, and Xi's government feels the heat. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But right now, let me talk about the unfair playing field, which is kind of underlying Trump's strategy. Why, did he start doing this? And I've already alluded to some of this. Trump's not throwing the tariffs out for the fun of it. There is a much deeper issue here. Simply, American firms face huge obstacles to selling their products in China, in Chinese markets, while Chinese firms have advantages and are greatly profiting in American markets. The scale tilts heavily toward China. And that's what, Trump is talking about when he calls it an unfair advantage. So I already mentioned and talked about how U.S. companies cannot enforce legal rights in Chinese courts. You're an American firm, you sue a Chinese firm for stealing your tech. Good luck getting a fair trial in Beijing. It's not happening. As I've said, U.S. firms don't even try. It's useless. Theft of U.S. technology, theft of U.S. know-how is legal in China. Now, Chinese companies listed on U.S. exchanges don't have to follow the same accounting rules U.S. companies do. they don't have to follow what's known as GAAP, GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Procedures, which is law for every firm registered on a U.S. exchange or domiciled in the U.S. They can hide expenses, they can inflate profits, and they can dodge the transparency that U.S. firms are forced to provide. They have much lower accounting and overhead costs. It's like playing chess with somebody who gets to hide their pieces. I just saw green flash before me. So, yay. I think E-Train figured out how to gift the memberships. It is a hugely unlevel playing field. Now, sometimes Chinese stocks might look cheap, like Alibaba, but keep in mind their books could be a house of cards. And this is why Trump's team is acting. It's not just trade, it's fairness. Treasury Secretary Bessent knows this game. He's shorted economies before, and he's betting China's vulnerabilities give the U.S. an edge. Now let's see, take a minute and see how those vulnerabilities are hitting key assets. Yes, ma'am.
I have to, we have an epic thing.
Did Carson get one?
Carson got membership. He actually sent me a text.
For those of you who don't know, Carson
am so excited.
Carson is a friend of the channel and I guess I'd have to say an irregular viewer. I don't know exactly how often he's able to watch with his schedule, but he pops in a lot. And Ellen has tried to gift him a membership. She can't really control who it goes to, but she tries to award it when she knows he's watching or whatever, and it never picks him. It always goes to somebody else.
Not watching.
It's become a running joke. See, as soon as he gets one, he's gone. But that's Carson.
Like I'm done with the boys, but oh my God, I got one. Finally.
So that's been kind of a running joke on the channel, literally for a year or two. Probably a couple of years, actually. Oh, yeah. So that's Ellen has questioned, whether YouTube hates Carson or what, but yeah.
Or so Canada hates or if Canada can't get them, and
yeah, it's export controls. We don't know
for Carson,
but I'm happy so for
excited.
Ellen. She's enjoying the hell out of this.
He's so excited. It's about time.
Jane, who else will be impacted
Jane has
once
a question.
Who else will be impacted once their economy collapses? I mean, clearly the U.S. will be impacted because a lot of money will be fleeing China, and it has to end up somewhere. So just think, if you were an international or global investor with billions and billions in capital, where would you move it? You can rule out certain regions. Russia, probably not yet. Africa, probably no. Middle East, probably no. South America, you may look at Argentina, but El Salvador, but a lot of those countries have been relatively unstable. So no. So that really leaves Mexico, Canada, US, Europe. And so you pick the best opportunities there. If Trump is successful in getting corporate taxes cut to 15%, that'll be the lowest corporate tax rate in the world. The U.S. has the easiest repatriation of money. That is, if you earn money in the U.S., you can take it out and bring it back to your home country, wherever that is, without restriction. A lot of countries will limit that. The laws, you get a fair shot in U.S. courts. So, in terms of international investors, the U.S., even if you don't necessarily like the current leader, the U.S. is generally a good place to invest in compared to a lot of other places in the world. So, but those countries, those areas would probably see an influx of capital fleeing China. Negatively impacted would be those countries most closely aligned with China. That's one reason why I think it's important for Russia to stay out of their intimate orbit. And there are not many countries who are really bound to China. North Korea would be one. Vietnam has a love-hate relationship with them. That China, people go, China only exports 14% of its goods to the U.S. Well, that's direct exports. It will send goods to a lot of countries like Vietnam, Myanmar, India, Korea, even Japan. And then the companies in those countries will export to the US, but it's labeled being from Vietnam, Myanmar, Indonesia, India, wherever. So that is an even bigger chunk of Chinese production that goes to the US. I don't know what the real total is, but it's more than 14%. But Trump is cracking down on that too. He will heavily fine, he will increase tariffs against the country that allows it. Vietnam is busting its ass trying to crack down on that now. And, China actually wanted to try to isolate the U.S. And you think, well, Vietnam's kind of communist. They're a little borderline, but they're becoming more liberal. But the thing is, China has bullied them for a decade, both economically and militarily, trying to declare certain lands and islands and regions of the Western Pacific belong to them. And, Vietnam, the Philippines, have had certain kind of military brushes or conflicts with China. India has on the border. So none of their quote unquote business associates are really tied to China, and they would love a chance to steal that business from China. So a lot of these plants that move out of China will likely move to Vietnam, to India, to Myanmar, to Indonesia. And they'll love that. They'll eat that up. And so they really will gravitate more towards the US sphere of influence because of economic necessity, even if they don't like our politics per se. Um, so the another thing to keep in mind about the volatility in China's economy and markets isn't just economic, it's political. There is a power shift occurring. Now, it's a little hard to see, but we know that there's increasing pressure on Xi. I talked about a couple of weeks ago how the three generals who were closest to him have been replaced. In the US, there's also a power shift going on. The jitters in the US market create some uncertainty, but they give Trump some leverage. For now, just understand that this chaos is pushing capital to safer assets. US treasuries are starting to see inflows again. 10 years initially dipped to 3.9, rose to 4.5 as China was selling treasuries. but it's come back down to 4.3. Remember, yield, price. So as yield goes up, price goes down. Well, China's selling treasuries lowered the price, forcing the yields higher. But people started buying treasuries, forcing the price up and the yield back down. That makes sense? So we've been seeing some huge swings in yields over the past month. Generally, this is good for bondholders, but also signals broader fears. Um, Now, in terms of global trade disruptions, we've talked about the drop of 90% in container volume from China. We talked about factories shutting down, warehouses overflowing. I mentioned Amazon's canceling orders. This isn't just a China problem, it's a global one. Supply chains will be strained. I fully expect costs to go up on some items. Companies like Walmart, which have relied on cheap Chinese goods, you know, will be probably passing some of these costs on to you. I think Jane mentioned earlier that Walmart has said they are switching
Mhm.
to made in America products as well. It'll take some time, but and you hear this that cost of goods, Chinese goods will go up, be inflationary. But what you won't hear on other broadcasts, what most don't understand, including economists or many of them, is that tariffs generally are deflationary. Yes, they ultimately cause prices to drop. Now, we've already seen, for example, the price of oil drop from $73 to $58 a barrel. And oil influences the cost of everything in this country. It is the foundation for everything in everyone's existence. We even saw deflation last month at minus 0.1%. Prices declined in the first month of tariffs. We see housing prices have been dropping for the last 4 or 5 months. That's continuing. Food costs are dropping. I saw somebody post a sign today, eggs on sale at $1.99. Remember 2 months ago when they were $12, $9 or $12? So overall, the effects are deflationary. Remember when Trump first implemented tariffs in 2017, the inflation rate for that year was 1.9%, 2017. In 2016, Obama's last year, inflation was 2.1. So inflation rate actually dropped when tariffs were put into place. So this is kind of a wake-up call. Global trades, certainly can be fragile. It does have a lot of countries rethinking their reliance on China and seeing China is a possibly an unreliable partner. So there's some huge winds blowing. Trends are shifting. Past is not prologue. Hell, I ought to put that on a t-shirt. Past is never prologue. Or is not prologue.
Never?
Not never,
Never?
but often. Past is
Jane,
prologue. Jane,
past is prologue.
Walmart is setting up a program to bring smaller American businesses onto their marketplace. So you probably will be paying more for some goods. I also saw Temu saying it was going to start sourcing all American products.
Ah, come on.
That's what they said.
I call BS on that one.
You may be right, but I'm just, repeating what I saw. The thing is, yeah, you probably will be paying more for cheap t-shirts or little plastic goods. But I'm also willing to bet that what you buy won't be in the junkyard in 2 years. It'll be better quality. It'll last longer, wear better, won't break as easy. And I kind of, for me, that's not a bad trade off. If I buy something, I want it to work and last. I don't like this idea of disposable stuff. But, maybe that's just me, but nonetheless, it will create a whole lot less waste in our landfills and junkyards.
Yeah, well,
And
I mean,
that's
there are
not
a
a
few things
necessary.
that I know both you and I were like, we're not going to buy it cheap, no matter, we don't care
Yeah.
what it costs. The thing is important. It's not worth buying something crappy.
Yeah. I rarely buy something with, a short-term use in mind. Now I'm not talking like, plastic gloves or, whatever that kind of stuff, but toys. I remember when I was a kid, I had like Tonka trucks. They were all metal. I don't know. They were lost in a move. I think probably the movers saw them and liked them and didn't bring that box with them. But anyway, I wish I still had them. If I did, they would still be great toys for my grandkids. Because Dad, when I brought them, when I quit playing, he always made me gather them up and wash them off and clean them and put them in a nice place to dry. I could go, pull them out tomorrow and go get them dirty again, but I had to take care of them. And those things were
Listen,
almost pristine.
this has worn off on Clay to the point that any tool that is used has to be cleaned off, put to dry, or put back at it. God bless him. Everything he has lasts forever because of those lessons that his dad taught him.
Yeah, I have still got a pair of rose shears from my dad that are probably 60 years old. I've got a hoe and a shovel that are easily 70, 80 years old that I still use. A lot of his tools, I've still got a bandsaw that's 50, 60 years old. Just I could go on down the list, but you get the idea. He took care of his tools, and he strongly encouraged me to do the same. Temu already has warehouses in America and is planning to expand these warehouses and bring on American businesses. A lot of companies are on multiple marketplaces such as Walmart, Temu, and Wayfair selling the same product. So it will be good.
Wayfair has a freaking outlet here. There was like a little clay bowl about this big, $60 at the outlet. The Adirondack chairs were $600 each at the outlet, the Wayfair outlet.
Well, damn.
Yeah, I was like, this is supposed to be like a kind of a TJ Maxx kind of thing. This is not feeling very TJ Maxxy at all. This is feeling more like, I don't know, Ethan Allen or somewhere like that.
Yeah, the what's the outlet down in Myrtle Beach? Can't think of the name of it.
It depends on where you're from, how you pronounce it.
Well, there's a big center, and it has
Tanger.
Yeah.
Tanger. Yeah.
Whatever. It has like 100 different outlets. Well, I've been down there a few times and just wandering around. And to me, the prices aren't any different. And historically, an outlet would be, some remote place away from any metropolitan center where the company would send overproduction or seconds or returns, things they could not sell as new. Well,
or outdated.
Yeah. Well, they don't really have that much of that stuff.
Right.
So they have simply, used these outlets. They can run their factories at 100%. send whatever they can to the higher price retail stores, and then whatever's left, they send to their outlets so that their outlets are always well stocked. And the price might be a little cheaper than it is in the high end retail stores, but it's not any great discount. So to me, outlet doesn't really have the same meaning that it used to.
Jane.
Yeah, most items sold at these outlet stores are made exclusively for the outlets. I don't know how they do it. I just know they're not, like Ellen said, they're not that much cheaper.
A lot of times it's like,
Yeah.
it's more expensive. I'm like, I didn't expect to come here and look. I mean, I just went to look. This was months ago. And I was like, no, not doing this.
Yeah, I can make a good Adirondack chair for $50 in lumber. Coat of primer, a couple coats of paint. I've got spray guns, some screws. Yeah. $600 is crazy. Anyway. And I look forward to getting back into woodworking a little bit once, my schedule frees up some. I just enjoy working with my hands. I haven't really been able to do that much the past 20 years. And I miss it. So look forward to being able to do that.
You're jealous of that deck I made. Was a lot of help.
Yeah, Ellen put together a modest sized deck. I don't know the exact dimensions.
12 by 12.
You cut 12 by 12? Okay.
12 foot by 12 foot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyway.
I had some help, but yeah.
Well.
And did it in less than a day.
There's a lot of things that you do need. An extra pair of hands helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fine looking deck. I will give credit.
It's sturdy. It's stable. It's a floating deck. Not literally, but it's on the concrete.
Yeah.
Thanks. Now I'm trying to grow grass.
Did you put any screen under it to keep creepy crawlies from out underneath it?
Of course I did. Yeah.
Good thinking.
Thank you.
On
occasion.
All right. China. Emerging market risk, I think, was what I was going to talk about next. You will see, as if China collapses or continues to collapse, you will see growth slowing across good parts of Asia, Africa, Latin America. China has a lot of investments in those areas, trying to extend its influence, its sphere of influence. But there will be capital flight out of these countries that are more closely aligned with China. We just saw, kind of a deal with the Panama Canal where China is being treated out. Hello, Carson. Glad you're a member. What took you so long?
I am so happy that Carson got one. I'm so proud.
I mean, E-Train is on the verge of tears. She really made her day.
Finally. That's awesome, Carson. Glad to have you as a member, boo. All right. Get back to the kiddos.
All right.
See you soon.
Give the kiddos a hug for us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this ripple effect is going to weaken China's global influence. If emerging markets suffer, China's Belt and Road projects, the big infrastructure loans it's trying to make, face defaults. So China has loaned big money to some of these countries for infrastructure projects. Well, if China has to withdraw, if they don't have the money to continue them, countries can't afford to finish them, so they'll default. which further isolates Beijing. China is a highly, highly leveraged society. If their income falls, which is something they never anticipated, it's like our subprime crisis. Remember how banks kept loaning ridiculous amounts of money for houses at ever increasing levels with no regard to any potential that housing prices could decrease? Well, they did decrease ultimately and took down the banks with them. Same thing's going to happen to China. If their income falls, their ability to pay the loan collapses. And this will have huge deflationary impacts on China's economy and foreign investors. You'll see a huge sell-off in Chinese assets. So, this is not just a encouragement to diversify, to not bet on one region. This is an encouragement not to make stupid bets. When you see risk increasing like that, there's certain risk you can't afford to take as an investor. It's just not the time, because the vast majority of time you'll have big losses. So you've got this kind of global environment, and this really kind of set the stage for Trump and Bessent to make their move. And they're playing it hard. So let's see how they are working to turn this crisis into opportunity. And like I said earlier, it's not just economic, it's not just trade, it's economic warfare. The key, I believe, is that they're trying to isolate China by getting agreements out of all their surrounding countries, all of Asia, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Taiwan, Thailand, India, ending China's ability to sell through them. Now, understand that China's whole macroeconomic model is based on overproduction and exports. China will overbuild its manufacturing capability to ensure that it can be the low price provider on products. It undercuts other producers, putting them out of business, and then China can raise its prices. They've done it time and time and time again. That simply can't continue. These countries now haven't been able to just shun China because, one, China is geographically very close. Two, China still has investments in these countries. They don't want to see all that money flee out quickly. But they're no real lovers or admirers of China and the way China has treated them economically or militarily. So they've already begun to start shifting more and more away from China. Like I said earlier, Vietnam is busting their ass trying to clean up this rebranding trade. Every incentive that you can think of, stable money, capital investment, market share, fair trade, is only available with the US, not with China. So we offer them a whole lot more opportunity to prosper and to do well going forward than China does. Trump's weapon in all this? Tariffs. Now, everybody, I think, is pretty aware he's slapped tariffs on China of about 145%. Already talked about how China cannot subsidize those tariffs long term, maybe a few months at 10 to 20%. They also can't devalue the yuan enough to cover them up or to drop their price sufficiently. In 2017, 2018, to keep access to the American market, China and Chinese companies absorbed, according to studies, anywhere between 75 to 81% of the cost of Trump's 25% tariffs. Now, They did that because they couldn't afford to lose the U.S. trade. This time, Xi's regime is even in greater need, more desperate to continue U.S. trade, but he does not have the resources to pick up the tab for long. The only option for them is not producing the goods or changing their whole economic model. That's huge. It means Chinese manufacturers are bleeding and bleeding a bunch. And, enter side stage Scott Bessent, Trump's ace in the hole. This smells an awful lot like his plan. Isolate China using tariffs to pressure allies into joining the U.S. Now, like I say, Bessent's a hedge fund veteran who's made billions and billions on shorting economies before. This guy is the best in the world at spotting cracks. And haven't talked to him, but my strong impression is he's betting China's dependence on the U.S. market gives America huge leverage. Now, without the U.S., China's economy collapses. Bessent is pushing for a U.S. manufacturing revival. Think, factories in Ohio, not Sichuan. The strategy is clear. Hold the first island chain, build an alliance with India, keep Japan close, flip Russia away from China, and control trade flows. Now, some of those are a balancing act. For example, flipping Russia away from China. The U.S., over the past many years, in its vocal support for Ukraine, in cutting Russia off from using the dollar and the SWIFT network and others, has really built up some animosity in Moscow among a lot of the oligarchs there who have lost billions, had their yachts seized and sold, et cetera, et cetera. And these oligarchs still have a lot of power. So Putin is not strong enough to where he can just do whatever he wants whenever he wants. He's got to tread some ground lightly. So this will be, if what I perceive is happening, it will be a slow shift to unalign Russia with China and to increase their trade and interaction with the U.S. and then hopefully Europe, and try to normalize existence again and away from all the hostility. That ultimately would be best for everybody. Now, while, people talk about a trade war going on, they kind of ignore the fact that over 200 countries have lined up in D.C. to try to make deals. They want, or by coming and negotiating, they at least indicated they're open to having more fair trade. China is getting different treatment from these countries for a reason. Trump's playing a much bigger game than most people recognize.
If they don't align with the U.S., they're really screwed.
Yes.
If they back up China, they're also really screwed. Same thing, same. And China is going to be the receiver of nothing good.
Yeah, China has treated many of them, particularly their bordering countries in Asia, like dirt. And the different cultures generally don't harmonize well with the other countries' cultures in Asia.
Sure.
The Japanese have a unique culture that they think's better. The Koreans have a unique culture they think's better. The Chinese think they're better on down the line. So they are not natural allies. I mean, they've warred for thousands of years among themselves. And the Oriental paradigm, they have a long memory. Like Jews will still talk about the Holocaust as if they were personally involved. It is a deeply personal thing to them. The Occidental mind doesn't operate with that same sense or appreciation of history or familial lineage. The
Is
Oriental
that
mind
why I'm
does.
is that why I'm so about the US, and because my ancestors, since they've been here in the 1700s, have fought for it, and it's sort of
Well,
ingrained in me
well,
to,
people in the West are more concerned about the here and now.
not me.
Orientals have much greater respect and honor for the past, for their ancestors. And they remember slights. They remember insults. They remember wars. We're ready to make allies out of Germany and Japan shortly after the war ended. It's just a different mindset. I'm not saying one's necessarily better than the other. I actually have some appreciation and respect for both approaches.
I mean, holding grudges is never a good thing, but having pride in your heritage.
No.
I mean, I was mixing the two.
Yeah.
What you're saying up.
Fair enough. So the that kind of begs the question of, and this is kind of where it gets a little wild. China has a stated GDP growth at 3%, which is the lowest in decades. So if China is reporting extremely low GDP growth, they're hurting. Is it at a tipping point? Keep in mind, Xi has been looking to destroy the West for years. That has been almost his singular goal. Now, he could have avoided the trade war by ending, predatory and criminal practices, particularly the deliberate building of overcapacity, which forces, why do you build overcapacity?
What do you
Well,
mean?
it's simply, go ahead.
No, ask a question. What do you mean?
Well, China, in building its factories, built factories
Mm-hmm.
that can produce more than what's needed.
Because they were looking to the future and thinking it was going to grow.
Well, they're running their factories at full bore. And what they end up doing is flooding the world with goods, trying to be the low-cost producer.
Mm-hmm.
That puts competitors out of business, which then leaves the Chinese with the market, and they can price it more advantageously.
Quote unquote.
Quote unquote. Now, Xi has rejected consumption as a basis for the Chinese economy. He doesn't want the Chinese acquiring wealth.
Mm-mm.
The system is actually geared toward repressing consumers. So
In
the
that
rates
country.
are in that country. The rates are low to facilitate lending to factories, but they keep the wages low to keep consumers from being able to take advantage of them as well. So most consumers in China can't afford to borrow money to build a house or whatever. Profits are used to enrich party members. It's a lot of corruption, and to fund China's military, which has made great progress over the past 20 years. But therein lies China's greatest weakness. They have created such a deficit with us that they need our markets. They simply can't afford to live without our markets. So if you look at it and understand that, Xi has, in short, placed the fate of the Chinese economy in the hands of the leader of that irreplaceable market, the American one. Xi has, over the past decade, 15 years, worked to place the fate of the Chinese economy in Trump's hands. Don't you love some sweet irony? Trump,
Oh yeah.
therefore, is in a position to decide the future of China. American trade expert Alan Tonelson stated a week ago, "I wouldn't want to be in Xi Jinping's shoes right now." Told Newsweek that Monday a week ago, I think. There are empty chambers in his six-shooter. I thought that was a pretty adept description. Now, Xi's only way out is to get Trump to back down. And he's hoping that Americans do his work for him. I mean, if you look, there's a reason why China hyped the fall in U.S. stock prices. They were excited when the market was crashing. The Chinese Foreign Ministry declared, "The market has spoken." When has our State Department ever cheered China's crashing stock market? Ever?
No.
Now,
not that I'm aware.
Yeah, me either. The central point is that China's economic miracle, as people describe it, was built on one thing: being America's cheap manufacturing hub. Beijing has made American leaders and politicians rich, thinking they would protect them forever. But the reality is, Trump owes them nothing. They haven't paid him a dime. The numbers don't lie. U.S. exports to China, 143 billion. China's exports to the U.S., 440 billion. Simple fact: America buys more than 3 times China's next largest market, which is Japan. And keep in mind, I'm not. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No,
Finish
go ahead.
that sentence. No, that's what I was going to ask earlier on. Still, a stupid question. Let me look it up. Is what percentage of China's exports does the U.S. buy? And I couldn't find it. I heard I got numbers of the purchases we make, but I did not get like a percentage of us versus other countries.
Yeah, the numbers are hokey because we know that China will export goods to Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Japan, Korea, India, and then those companies who import from China in those countries will then re-export those goods to the U.S., but put "made in India," "made in Vietnam," "made in Malaysia" on the labels.
Okay.
It's like the designer purses. They were all made in China, but they ship them to Italy. In Italy, they glue on the label and say "made in Italy."
It's
and send
like
it
granite.
to the U.S.
Italian granite is all Brazilian. They just ship it to Italy first, and then ship it back to the U.S. because we'll pay whatever for it, and it's ridiculous.
So we don't really know the total of the shadow sales. But even without the shadow sales, in terms of reported exports, we're 3 times their next largest customer, which is Japan. They pour their products into our markets and restrict or copy ours in their markets. There is no way for America to win that fight. Now, currently, China's economy is 2/3 the American economy. And it's at least a 40% command economy. Command economy is a totalitarian economy, totalitarian state that tells you what you can buy. And it has, you don't see many people talking about this. It has an aging population. Now think about it. What do you buy your grandparents for Christmas? versus what do you buy your kids for Christmas? Which one's
Grandparents
easier?
don't need much.
Grandparents don't
Grandparents.
don't much. They don't buy much. They don't consume. So if you've got a rapidly aging population, they don't buy stuff. Not only that, the government doesn't want the young people buying stuff. So it's hard for them to buy stuff. Their wages are low. They don't have much opportunity. Now, the aging population is a big deal because China also lacks sufficient young people to support the old. Remember their one child policy they had for 15, 20
Oh, yeah.
years?
Yeah, they're under
Greatly,
2 for reproduction at this point, right?
yeah, it's an upside down triangle. And normally you need the triangle like this with young people, having enough young people to pay for their own lives as well as contribute to the taking care of the old
But most countries are backwards, they're upside down.
Western ones.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, so there's over 1 billion still living in poverty in an extremely corrupt system. That matters. That matters hugely, but most people ignore it. And it's not just economic, it's social. No jobs means unrest. High taxes with no future means unrest. Unable to have a family. Guys there's many more young men than there are women due to the one child policy. They're not happy. That means unrest. Videos on the nets show entire empty industrial zones. China's backbone, as I mentioned earlier, is snapping. Factory orders are frozen. This isn't a trade war. It's becoming an actual decoupling of the two economies. Our economies have been closely linked. A lot of trade, a lot of money flowing in one direction, but flowing. Well, that link is being severed. There will be some pain for the U.S., but given the alternatives, the future is vastly different depending on which road we would choose. Now, I've kind of laid out some economic theory. And remember how I say if you want to understand complex economic theories, you just shuck it down to the cob. You personalize the idea, strip out all the complexity, all the big words, and look at the simple nuts and bolts. So if you do that, it will give you far greater insights than most economists have. You got to realize economists make their living, and I'm an economist by degree and by trade, finance. We make our living by kicking up a cloud of dust, then complaining we cannot see. And I'm saying if you
Yeah.
want to understand some of that, shuck it down to the cob. So let's look at a couple different perspectives. What's happened in the US since the subprime crisis in 2008? Every American has a per capita figure of about 12 $112,000 in debt that they owe on behalf of the US government. Every American. So if you have a family of 4, y'all owe $448,000 as a family of US debt. In 2008, that figure was about 35,000 per person, which also roughly equaled the average salary of that time. Now the average salary has increased to about 62,000. So the average salary has doubled, not quite doubled, but meanwhile the debt that the government owes, your share has quadrupled. So the per capita debt doubled in 16 years. So think about how this works. Imagine you have to borrow money from Walmart to buy your stuff.
Like layaway?
Pardon?
Like layaway? What do you mean?
No, you're just you want to buy groceries, food, clothes, whatever at Walmart. You don't have any money, so you have to borrow money. So you borrow money from Walmart, then you go to Walmart and spend it in their store buying stuff. Well, sooner or later you run out of money, so you have to borrow more money from Walmart. And you continue going, buying your food, clothes, whatever. And this keeps on. That continues. Walmart, meanwhile, is using its money, which includes the money they lend you, to buy your house, to buy your employer, and ensure that property prices soar and your wages stagnate. Have you noticed in the US how wage growth has slowed and property prices have soared? China is getting richer and richer, and you're getting poorer and poorer. That's not a sustainable model. Sooner or later, that house of cards collapses on you. It's like Greece in the EU, European Union, the only country who produces nothing of export value. I mean, except olives and olive oil. But what else does Greece produce that anybody wants? Nothing. They don't produce planes, trains, electronics, nothing. So they are the only country whose living standards have worsened since the EU was formed, because money only flows in one direction, and that's out of Greece. Are you getting the picture? Does this make sense? Yes. Mm-hmm. A model where nothing of value is produced to other countries leaves cash flowing in one direction. And it's simply not sustainable without the constant creation of money to pay that bill, which has problems of its own.
Inflation.
It will create it will create a temporary illusion of success, and that right before the big collapse. So this is huge. Tariffs aren't just about trade. They're a weapon. If China can't subsidize its manufacturers, the economic pressure will spark protest, even rebellion. Xi's government relies on growth to keep its power. Without it, the cracks widen. Remember I talked about the crumbling pagoda? Well, this is how those cracks widen. That increasing volatility will tank Chinese assets further, and at the same time boost U.S. markets as capital flees to safety. I mean, Trump has even intimated this, last Sunday, and he stated that, or implied that, trade problems with China go far beyond tariffs. He said hundreds of billions of dollars a year we lose to China, and unless we solve that problem, I'm not going to make a deal. Xi, as a practical matter, cannot rebalance trade relations with America until he fundamentally restructures his whole economy. If that point is true, and I believe it is, his options are extremely limited. Keep in mind, Xi was already under pressure. Several of his generals have been replaced. There are riots. There are murmurings in many areas of China. Youth unemployment is in excess of 30%. You're 25 years old. You graduated from college with a good degree. Can't find a job. I saw a video of one young lady had sent out over 2,800 resumes in the past year. 0 job offers. She was on the verge of tears because in China, it's a matter of honor, of life, getting a job so that you can take care of your parents who have taken care of you this whole time.
Make your family proud. That's
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it is great shame, dishonor if they can't find a job.
Or if they can't find a husband, that's the same, as I've heard, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so few girls, I don't think the girls have the problem finding the husband. They're even at the point now where they can pick out their husband instead of having to accept whatever's offered. So the one child policy, because most families chose a male and against females, because in China and many other societies, historically, the son is responsible to take care of the parents in their old age. So the boys are the retirement plans. So if they could only have one child, they would, abort it if it was female. And so there are very few females in China. Well, what that has done is elevate their value to the point where now they don't have to have marriages arranged for them. They can literally pick who they want to marry. So the value of women has increased greatly in China. Last year in China, less than 1/3 of college graduates found a job, and that number is going to crash this year. They're not like American youth. That's not being able to find a job is deeply troubling to them. In fact, I've got the video of the girl that I was talking about. I was going to post it, but we'll probably get a strike.
And you'll probably get one here.
Will I?
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
For doing that?
Just post it.
Yeah.
No,
there it is. If you want to see the video. So the idea is, this is a
9
war.
o'clock.
Okay. Getting closer. Run a little short sometimes, probably run a little long sometimes. And
hey, I'm here and I made it. I'm still on the whole thing.
She is. That's been a little
I was
rare
letting you know it's 9 o'clock and I'm still here.
We'll see how she's doing at 10 or 11.
No, we don't do that because somebody has to go bed.
I'm kidding. All right. So this is a war. And the question really is, can you win a war without firing a shot? And history says yes. Think of Reagan and the USSR in the 80s. Economic pressure broke the Soviet economy and the regime fell. Trump and Bessent might be playing the same game. Now, Jane, do you think that some of these young people who can't find jobs will immigrate to America and other countries? Well, the whole world is suffering kind of a recession, has been for a year or two. I mean,
they just don't know it yet.
The U.S. in the last year and a half lost 2 million full-time jobs. So, and we've done better than most countries. Most of the new job growth has been in government or areas paid for by government, like healthcare and education. The private sector has been hammered. Now, this strategy has some upsides for America. There are manufacturing booms beginning in the Rust Belt. I mean, Trump has received nearly $6 trillion in new factory commitments. Now, $6 trillion, is that good, bad, or indifferent? Well, last couple of years, Biden received commitments for $100 billion. So far in 3 months, Trump has 6 trillion with a T. It's simply massive, absolutely massive.
Well, I think that the companies that have been in China realize what's going on in China. And they're going, hey, if you're going to tariff them, help us out. We're in.
Some of them are moving to the US, a lot of them to India, to Vietnam, Malaysia, wherever, out of China.
Mm-hmm.
But there
Hurting
will
on China,
be
no doubt.
there will be a significant increase in manufacturing jobs in the US. Trump's first 3 months have seen an increase in manufacturing jobs of about 14 or 15,000. Well, in 2024, Biden's last year, we lost 110,000 jobs in manufacturing. So that's a hell of a turnaround just in a few months. Manufacturers are excited. They're starting to have hope. They're starting to see some future opportunities emerging. So, this is, a silver lining to some of the chaos and confusion that's going on. There are risks. It's a tightrope. China has retaliated with counter tariffs. U.S. exports like soybeans. Global markets have been jittery. Pushing Xi to the brink could backfire. I mean, they might lash out. Think cyber attacks or invading Taiwan.
Power grid.
Power grid. And it's a reminder that economic wars can spark real ones. So, but if you look at history, and it's kind of a crystal ball, there's forgive me, I'm not keeping up with the slides too well here. Can you tell?
We don't see them anyway, Moffat. We can't see them anyway.
Oh, geez, they haven't been up, have they? That's really sad. I worked my ass off trying to get some of these slides put together. Oh my God. This absent-minded thing with your PhD is a real issue. Oh, geez. Anyway, see how pretty that is?
I'm glad you brought it up. I haven't seen any of it.
Yeah, there's the chess game I was talking about. How cool is that?
Oh, see. Oh my God.
And there's
look at that.
Look at that. Anyway.
Oh God. Hey, Jane. Hey. I'm dying.
Welcome to the Sunday night edition of Moffat on Money.
Oh, I'm dying. It hurts.
You don't realize the time this takes, and that's why E-Train is finding it so amusing. Anyway. History. I love me some history. Here you go. I'm going to mute you in a minute. Oh, she already muted herself. All right. Oh, you got a split screen. On the left, a 2018 newspaper headline about U.S.-China tariffs. On the right, a 1980s image of U.S.-Japan trade tensions. And I got a gold scale up front of how it balances success and risk. Background's a neutral gray because it's always a risk. There's uncertainty. It's a mixed bag. So when I put these together, I try to put some thought into the different things. And creating an image is not that easy using AI. I obviously don't paint these. I use AI, but sometimes AI just can't get the graphics right. It's a little bit of a pain. Jane, I do know how much time it takes. Remember, I've hosted the show for you in the past. Yep, Jane has, and E-Train has. But it's a labor of love. Anyway, so history does kind of repeat, keeps playing out. In 2018, Trump put tariffs on China, about $250 billion worth. It hurt Beijing, growth slowed, U.S. felt some pain too. But the inflation rate held steady until COVID hit. 2025, it's a little bit more involved, game of chess or checkers. Chess means a long-term win, weaken China. You boost the U.S., maybe even topple Xi, who's had a pretty singular goal of destroying the West. If Trump and Bassett are playing checkers, then you could see a quick loss and global recession. China fights back, everyone loses. So it's a very fine line. The strategy has to be managed, adapted, altered, changed as circumstances change or allow. And a lot of it depends on how well responses were anticipated and planned for. So I've seen many talk about how China has 800 billion in treasuries. They could weaponize them by just dumping them all at once. But people who suggest that don't understand that that would actually hurt themselves more than the U.S. Because one, they have to do something with the cash. Likely would buy the yuan, which would strengthen the yuan, which hurts their international trade cash flows even more because their products become even more expensive. And they would still lose their biggest market. They would also lose the ability to execute future business in dollars, which is still the world's reserve currency and which they do most of their business in. And Secretary Bassett has already indicated that the Treasury and the Fed are ready to step in if China starts to dump them, meaning that the Fed and the Treasury will buy them. Now, what would that do to the U.S.? The U.S. money supply, M2, is currently about 23 trillion. So if they had to add 800 billion to buy all of the outstanding issues, it would increase the outstanding currency from 23 to roughly 24 trillion. Not a huge impact. It would increase inflation a little, but it would also save the Treasury about 24 billion in interest a year. Plus, it would lower the national debt by that amount. So that's the worst case scenario. And it's not that worst case. Now, an interesting aspect of this is that China and Xi, particularly Xi, were just completely and totally unprepared for Trump's extensive demands, his reworking of the trade. They just did not see it coming. They expected something much milder like he implemented in 2017. Now, over the years, China has paid billions to U.S. politicians, both directly and through organizations like Act Blue. Act Blue had millions of anonymous donors. Money. You all right, E-Train? Now you see her, now you don't.
I had to compose myself. I'm sorry. I'm funny.
You're fun. Welcome back. And there she goes again.
I'm sorry. Right. I know. you spend to do this. And
That's all right. So they paid billions to U.S. politicians, and that money has been shut down. ActBlue, and some of the NGOs have just had their legs cut out from under them. Now, China doesn't feel like this is just a trade war, but a decisive, great struggle for dominance, the greatest since World War II. They are looking at it that seriously. Now, China has tried to.
Zuckerberg sold the technology for the blue for lots of money.
Yep.
Okay. Just throwing that in here with all this. I couldn't read everything because I'm
Yeah, they have shoveled billions to influential Americans, both corporately and politically. I mean, when a president has 32 shell companies that are raking in millions from unknown sources, you don't have to imagine a whole lot of what is going on. But China had plans to include developing a united front of countries associated with the World Trade Organization, like Japan, Canada, the EU, Vietnam, Malaysia, India, to isolate America and end its dominance. Well, long story short, this has failed and utterly failed. These countries like India, Vietnam, Bangladesh are all celebrating because China has treated them like a redheaded stepchild for decades. They are ready to take China's place and open their markets to the U.S. And obviously, Trump's willing to deal. China is trying to force the withdrawal of capital from the U.S. and, considering and is selling loads of treasuries. They, a few weeks ago, argued it was a fight to the death. Their words, a fight to the death. This would be indicative of their recognizing it's a full decoupling of the two economies. Now, they're implementing a rationing system of food and supplies. They're trying to strengthen ties with Russia, Iran, and North Korea, as well as, Cambodia, Myanmar, Indonesia, a few others, who they've been bullying economically and militarily for years. And that's failing. Left to right, it's failing. There, some of the plans that have been revealed is planning for an invasion of Taiwan, which is still very possible. Their goal was to try to turn the U.S. into a regional power. Well, the plans unveiled by Xi to Chinese leaders, which have been disclosed, generated extreme concern in the Communist Party and have kind of ended up making Xi's position even more tenuous. They're facing a huge unemployment crisis by summer. Economic stability is just a thing of the past, not happening anytime soon. Well, people care about their money. And having that flow creates factions within the party, which makes governance even more chaotic. Xi's iron triangle in the military has fallen. That doesn't help him any. And we saw this week China quietly exempted 1/4 or 30% of U.S. imports from their tariffs. They didn't announce it. The tariffs just disappeared. This, according to Bloomberg. Why would China do that when they're in a fight to the death? Because they are trying to mitigate damage to their own economy. These are critical elements that they need from the U.S. And so they eliminated the tariffs on those goods because they are saying one thing publicly, but being forced to do the exact opposite economically, practically. That's a huge sign of the pressure on Xi.
Jane?
I admit, yes, ma'am.
Jane?
Oh, I know you talked about this before. It's time for preparedness. Desperate people do desperate things. Couldn't have said it better myself. And we do encourage people to be prepared for uncertainty, in case things go south. While the chances may be slim, if that possibility does occur, it's kind of a risk you can't afford to take. It's the way I look at it. So, not trying to encourage everybody to become a doomsday prepper, but what if there is a cyber attack against the electrical grid? We've got 9 points, and if 4 of them are taken out, 60% of the country loses electricity for 6 months to a year. So, can you get by without your credit card, without the money in your bank, without, food at the grocery store, transportation, no gas stations, no pumping gas? All that will come to a halt. What are the chances of that occurring? Slim. What
20.
do you do if it does? There's certain risk you can't afford to take. So you ought at least, and that's one reason why we talk and have some shows on preparedness, because it never hurts to improve your skills, to improve your knowledge, to improve your ability to provide for yourself and your family should you need to. I mean, we saw Katrina hit New Orleans, and that town was out of power for weeks. And there were gangs roaming the streets. Cops weren't patrolling. They were at home protecting their families. There were water shortages.
It was ever chaos.
Yeah. So we know society degrades rapidly when the system fails, and there's no hope of it being restored soon. Now, like the huge electrical failure in Spain and France, they lost power for 12 hours. There weren't riots, there weren't robberies, whatever. But people knew that or believed that it would be turned on soon. What if they start believing that it won't? Society can devolve quickly. Jane, power outages happen from natural disasters. It's just smart to be ready just in case. Look at the chaos that happened on the Iberian Peninsula. Yeah, you had people stuck in cars miles and miles away from their home, people in trains, people in elevators that were stuck. A lot can happen that would happen at a terribly inconvenient time. If the lights went out and there were wrecks all up and down the roads, I'm 20 miles from my work. It'd take me basically a whole day to walk home. How many people could do that? It's just a word to the wise. So we know Chinese workers are protesting, demanding back pay. China doesn't have the cash. We know the shutdowns are greater than those during COVID-19. So far, we know or have reports of over 1,800 facilities, manufacturing plants, shutting down just in the past couple of weeks. According to CNBC, thousands of small companies in China are on the verge of bankruptcy. Again, cash poor, no liquidity, high debt. In addition, Chinese companies are looking at offshoring production to Vietnam, to India, to Malaysia. An idea kind of, keep the customers, but ditch Chinese workers. Think about it. The momentum for that is only increasing, particularly in the face of increasing regime pressure to return to the glory years of Mao. China's
Forgive
experiencing
me,
its worst.
Clay,
Sure.
but it's not a whole lot different than Biden all of the asylum into the US. In my opinion,
Also,
same mindset. Well, because you're screwing your own workers
abandon
over.
the Chinese workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Jane, in the past, over 60 miles from my house and got stuck for over 10 hours because of a wreck on the major highway. I learned my lesson. I always keep an emergency bag in my car. And that's the real question. If you're, driving away from your home, if things break, if you're using mass transit, if you're using trains, if there's, a failure in the system, okay, if it only lasts a few hours, you'll be okay. Inconvenience, but you'll be okay. What if it goes for days or weeks or longer? You should have some flexibility. You should have some options. You may never need them. I hope you never do. But we have seen different areas in this country where people have needed them before. It is possible.
Yeah, if I go over 10 miles usually from where I live, I've got extra meds with me. I mean, just what's going to happen?
Yeah, you just never know. And it's better to be prepared and not need it than need it and not be prepared. And
Fair.
so the momentum in China is only increasing to abandon China. They have the worst banking crisis in their history, real estate crisis, youth unemployment, all these things I mentioned previously. Bassett has picked his target well. Now, talk about the impact of.
As far as stocks, would you short the yen at this point?
Currency is a very fast moving market. And I'm not at a terminal watching it all the time. I do think the long-term trend is for a weakening yuan, not the yen, yuan. Yen is Japanese.
Sorry.
And it's possible that the yen is going to weaken as well. But it's risky. And I'm not at a terminal all the time keeping a good eye on it. So I personally would not trade it. But I do believe the long-term prognosis is for a weaker yuan. But China has 800 billion. They can keep it propped up for a while. Don't know what they'll do, how they'll do it, or if they will. They may just lose all options. Now I was thinking about what's the impact of tariffs, and I mentioned the designer clothes, tariff on designer items, purses, and I saw an interesting story about the markups. There was a deal. It was actually in Canada for our Canadian viewers. So shout out to all of y'all. There was a deal in Hamilton where a company had won a contract from the government there to provide little houses for the homeless. And they charged the government $7 million for 40 homes, $175,000 per home. And they were awarded the contract because they were an indigenous member of society. and represented that they manufactured these themselves using local labor. So 175,000 per home. Well, ends up they were buying them on Alibaba for $1,800 per home, selling them for 175,000. Bought them for 1,800. You got to make that bread. So, that just was another example of the margin in a lot of these Chinese products. A lot of that just can be eaten. If it's passed through to the consumer, it'll be a 10 or 20% increase in price. Either way.
All right, Moffitt is 30.
Okay. All right. I'll finish up here quickly.
Okay.
China has basically three options. It can devalue the yuan by 30 to 50%, which would crash the economy. Or it can implement the biggest fiscal stimulus in history of 3 to 4 trillion, which will incapacitate China's debt markets and cause spiraling inflation, crash the economy. Or it can concede to Trump, lose face, regime change would be inevitable, probably violent, and crash the economy. They don't have a good choice. I just saw where Thursday, I think the EU presented a proposal to eliminate tariff and non-tariff barriers and to increase investment in the US, which is happening anyway. Money's fleeing Europe, and cooperating on what it described as quote unquote global challenges. So that's another party that China wanted to use against the US that is saying, no, we're siding with the US. We want to continue trade. So realistically, we're seeing the beginning of the end, the second stage of this economic war. First stage was tariffs. Second stage is logistics. The real issue for America is how quickly can producers adjust and wean off their China supply. Like I said, Apple has already arranged to shift production to India and use that production just to sell in the US. Whatever is manufactured in China, they'll sell in the rest of the world. So it won't impact prices in the US. And you'll see a lot of companies doing that.
Before you finish up.
Yeah.
Hey, we're glad you're here. Hit that like and subscribe, no matter what platform you're on. It helps us out a lot, doesn't cost you a thing, and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Really would appreciate if you would just take a second and do that. I already talked about Temu, said it's going to start sourcing products from the US instead of China. And Temu also announced they are not going to raise prices. Ta-da. So bottom line, I'm not going to predict the impacts, but my impression is that there will be some challenges, particularly like specialized firms in the US, some small firms. Now, I think the government can offer some relief loans or something. Larger firms should be able to weather the storm. The offset is that a lot of smaller firms will be able to take advantage of and increase their production. I saw this week where mortgage applications at the SBA, the Small Business Administration, have surged the past 90 days. Manufacturing loan applications have surged the past 90 days. The U.S. gained, like I said, 10,000 jobs during February alone after losing more than 110,000 in 2024. There's some hell of a turnaround there. So far, from what I can tell, it looks like the plan is being executed fairly well. And you got to love it when a plan comes together. Who can tell me where that quote is from? Anybody remember? Gotta love it when a plan comes together. I can still hear it in the
Moffat.
voice.
Moffat said it.
I wish. Anybody remember the
But if I was
old?
one of your, if I was one of your students, I answered on the test question. Moffat said it first.
And you probably get credit for it.
Uh-huh.
But anybody remember that old corny show, A-Team?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, at the end of every show, who was the guy? George Papard. He would always end it saying, "You gotta love it when a plan comes together." So
that helps.
That is that's kind of the sum of my thoughts and perspective on China. Had a
If you're
little
just
bit
joining
more.
us, go back. Hang on. Go back and watch the whole thing. It's great. 2, hit follow, subscribe, like the video. Or if you want to keep watching this kind of content, we love to geopolitical, finance, good stuff. So your support is always helpful. Doesn't cost you a thing.
Yeah, we do appreciate you joining us tonight. There's obviously a few other things that I wanted to cover. I've run a little long. So we will cover some of those, bits and bytes, some different things on the market. Tuesday, 7:00, Eastern Standard Time. We'll talk about.
And if you have any questions, either contact X, it's at Moffat on Money, Rumble at Moffat on Money, YouTube at Moffat on Money, Gmail, moffatonmoney@gmail.com. Send us any questions, any thoughts, any things you want us to go over, and we'll handle it. We're here for you.
We'll look. We look forward to hearing you. A fair amount of our content is dictated by questions that we receive from you guys. We want to help you make better decisions, have better information, and cover things that you really don't get on other channels. I can't always offer you great drama or intrigue, but hopefully the information has some value to improving your life.
We are paid by no one to do this. We do it because we love to do it. We do it because we think people should need information that is not biased in either way. Sometimes we probably can be biased, but we don't try to be. We try to just give you information that is, fact approved.
Yeah,
and that's all we can do.
Tuesday night, we will talk a little bit about Bitcoin, some interesting things going on in the world of Bitcoin. We'll talk about the price of oil. Why is oil price crashing and gasoline prices not? Some people are asking, why aren't gasoline prices falling? So we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll take a little bit more involved look at home pricing, what's going on in the home mortgage. Obviously, we'll talk about the market. It's had a good week or two. Can we expect that to continue, or is it just what I would call a dead cat bounce? We'll also talk about GDP.
More of that. No more dead cat bounces. Unless I say no. But I should have the store up by then. And it might. I think it's going to be the Stupid Should Hurt store.
It's going to be the what?
Stupid Should Hurt.
Oh, that might not be a bad name.
Moffat on Money.
Might not be a bad name.
All right.
We'll also talk about the GDP number that came out. It was negative. Is the economy just going to hell or handbasket, or was that kind of a weird number?
Dead cat bounce.
So those are some of the topics, questions that we'll address. If you've got some others you want added to the list, let us know. So enjoyed being with you tonight. Sunday night will be our regular, theme show. Tuesday night is really more of a Q&A time. If you have questions, I'll have some things, kind of prepared to cover, as I mentioned. But if you have specific questions, that's a great night to bring them. And we're pretty open on the topic. Most anything that YouTube would allow. So, I think that's all for tonight. I think E-Train is a little pooped. My voice is probably getting a little worn. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Whether you joined us early or late, we appreciate you. For those on the replay crew, we love you guys too. All the members of the family. Good seeing y'all, and I look forward to seeing you again Tuesday night. Our time is up.
Good night, everybody.
We thank you for yours. Good night. Y'all have a good week.